Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Bindabihari Jaya Untitled Chapter Divine Grace of High Charana, the Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON, Vividha Panda Church of Prabhupada Ki. Jai Nitya Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya. Untitled Chapter Divine Grace of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaja Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki. Brahma Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Guru Bhaktivinoda Ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gokapina Samakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki. Braj Bhumi Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki. Navadip Mayapur Dhama Ki. Purushtam Chatra Jaganapuri Dhama Ki. Ganga Maya Ki. Yamuna Maya Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Tulasi Maharani Ki. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki. Jainita Gopremanandi. All glories to some glories. All glories to some glories. All glories to some glories. All glories, glories to Shri Guru and Shri Garanga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada Ki. Jai. So Janardhan Prabhu asked me if I had a topic I specifically wanted to speak on. And I didn't really. But then I said, oh, I'll just speak about deity worship because I know something about deity worship. But I can also speak on Bhagavad Gita. It depends what you prefer. Any preference? No? Okay, so we'll speak on deity worship. We find that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in chapter 20 of the Madhya Lila, Lord Chaitanya is giving instructions to Sanatana Goswami. And primarily he's instructing him to write a book on devotional service. That book is called the Hari Bhakti Vilas. So at the start of Lord Chaitanya's instructions, he says, Guru Padasraya Diksha Guru Sevana Saddharma Siksha Priksha Sadhu Marga Anugamana. That Guru Padasraya, you take shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Guru Padasraya Diksha, then you take shelter of the Guru by Diksha, by initiation. Guru Padasraya Diksha Guru Sevana, then you serve the spiritual master. Saddharma Siksha Priksha, and you follow the instructions of devotional service. Siksha means instructions. And you follow the instructions of devotional service. Sadhu Marga Anugamana, and you follow the path that's given by the great devotees. As we, Mahajana Yeni Katha Sapanta, it mentions in the Mahabharata. The way to understand devotional service is by following that path which is given by the great devotees. So this is the beginning of the instructions. First time he gives 10 instructions of things that should be done. Then he gives 10 instructions of things that shouldn't be done. Totals up to 20. Then he gives a further 44 instructions on different things. But then he concludes it, and he says, but of all these, there are 5 that are most important. And by simply, a person who is without faith, who has even a little bit of a connection with one of these 5 items, the love of Godhead can be awoken. Mm-hmm. So then he explains, he said, how's the verse start? Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shavan, Maturabhasa Sri Mutare, Sarya Sevan. So he said, you know, it says that of all these 64 instructions, he said the 5 most important, the 5 most potent. Not only does he say important, but he says the 5 most potent. And there's a chapter that we see in the Nectar Devotion, which Rupa Goswami is entitled. It's maybe about chapter 9, 10, something like that. Which Rupa Goswami is entitled the 5 most potent forms of devotional service. And then Mahaprabhu explains that you know, of all these different instructions, these 5 are the most potent. So he says, sadhu sangha, to associate with devotees of the Lord. This is very, very powerful, because through the association of the devotees of the Lord, we can actually understand how to execute devotional service. Because on our own, it's very difficult. You know, I remember years ago, when I was, you know, practically a new devotee, and I was reading the Bhagavatam, and I was reading this section on when Vyasadeva was lamenting that he'd gone to all this trouble to write, you know, he broke the different Vedas, he wrote Mahabharata and this thing and that thing. And then just the conclusion I drew from that was reading this was, oh, Vyasadeva's in Maya. That's what's happening. I was just a young devotee, only in the movement 6 months, and it just sounded like he was in Maya. So then I discussed this with an older devotee. He said, no, actually, you don't understand the point at all. You know, he's an empowered incarnation of the Supreme Personality of God. He's just lamenting. He's expressing his dissatisfaction because he didn't, you know, he wasn't, you know, experiencing happiness from what he'd done. So you know, I got a practical experience then that it's not really so possible to understand the instructions of the scriptures on our own. So therefore we need to receive the instructions from advanced Vaishnavas, you know, like we see with Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas. So it's the Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan, so chanting the holy name. Now, of course, as we all know, the chanting of Hare Krishna, this is the Yuga Dharma. And I was just having a discussion with Mukunda Goswami a few days ago, on Tuesday actually, and he shared this verse with me that is quoted, I think it's in the 9th chapter of the Ali Leela, and I don't remember what number of verse it is, maybe 157 or something like that. Anyhow, so it's quoting a verse from the Bhagavatam, from the 11th canto, and it's saying that this single verse is the essence of all the instructions in the Bhagavatam. And what this verse talks about is the power of chanting Hare Krishna. So this is the essence of the instructions of the Bhagavatam, is to take shelter of the holy name. And actually the verse talks about how one experiences joy when they chant the holy name. So this is the essence of all the instructions in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course there's much that could be said about the effectiveness of chanting Hare Krishna. But that's not really the topic of tonight's discussion, so we won't talk on that too much. And this is, Bhagavad Shravan, to study the Srimad Bhagavatam. As we see in the 3rd chapter of the 1st canto, it says, Krishna Swadam Bhagade Dhamma Gyani Visan, Kalo Nasta Drishameshta, Puranako Dinadanaha. That this Bhagavata Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode. And he, you know, Lord Krishna, he returned to his own abode with knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. And it says, persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali, they'll get light from this Purana. So in this age of Kali, this Bhagavad Purana is the most important scripture, because simply by understanding the Bhagavad, by studying the Bhagavatam, one can actually, one's love of Godhead can be awakened. And then the next point he says is Maturavasa, to reside in the holy place. So he's saying this is also very, very important. And we see that many people, they reside in holy places like Mathura, Vrindavan, Mayapur, Sri Rangam, Jagannath Puri, you know, so many dhams in India. And then the last instruction says, Srimurtirishare Savan, to worship the deity with faith and veneration. This is one of the 5 most important angas of bhakti. And it's very interesting that Lord Chaitanya is explaining to Sanatana Goswami that deity worship is actually one of the 5 most potent angas of bhakti, because if we look at the other 4 angas that he's mentioning, or the other 4 practices of devotional service, they're all things that are quite relevant in Kali Yuga, especially the chanting of the holy name. This is, as we understand, the chanting of the holy name is actually the Yuga Dharma. So, why is it, and if we look at the deity worship, this is actually not the Yuga Dharma. It's not the Dharma for this age, it's actually the Yuga Dharma for the previous age, Dwapara Yuga. As we see, it's explaining in I think it's the 5th chapter of the 11th canto. Krita yad dhyayato Vishnu, Treta yam yajato bhakti, Dwapare paricharyayam, kalodhad dharikirtana. That in the first age, the Krita Yuga, the golden Yuga, the golden age, the dhyayato Vishnu, to meditate upon Lord Vishnu, that was the process. Then it says, Treta yam yajato bhakti, during Treta Yuga to perform yajna, with great opulence, with tons of ghee and grains and golden instruments, and hundreds of thousands of brahmanas chanting mantras, and making sure that everything was going on perfectly and correcting things. This was the process in Treta Yuga, and it says Dvapare Paricharyayam, in Dwapara Yuga, to worship the deity with great opulence. That was the process, and we can see there's an interesting description in the. What's that book called? The Jagannath Priya Natthikam, written by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, which was a drama based, like a play based on scripture. In there, it talks about how deity worship has always been present. In the first half of Lord Brahma's life, because now we're in the second half of Lord Brahma's life. He's just past his 50th birthday, believe it or not. Only a few days ago, by his estimation, which by our estimation is many hundreds of millions and billions of years. But he's just past his 50th birthday. And in the first half of his life, the deity for that period was called Nilamadava. But that deity now has gone, and the deity for the second half of his life is Jagannath. Jagannath Subhadra. So Jagannath's going to be worshipped for many, many years. So, and through many kalpas, and a kalpa means 1,000 ages. So Kali and Dwapara, Treta and Satyuga, 1,000 times that is a kalpa. A day of Brahma is that twice, because that's a 12-hour period. So Lord Brahma's life is very, very long. And Krishna says that in the Gita, he says, Sahasra Yuga Pariyantam Ahad Yad Brahmano Vidu, that 1,000 ages taken together equals one day of Lord Brahma. And such is his night. So a very, very long period. But the point being is that in the previous yuga, the process was deity worship. Not this yuga. The process for this age is chanting of Hare Krishna. So why is it that Lord Chaitanya, in his instructions to Sanatana Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami is not just some ordinary devotee or some regular devotee that Lord Chaitanya was instructing. Sanatana Goswami is one of the principal acharyas of the Gaudiya Vaishnava line. Two of our main acharyas are Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami, who we're known as Rupa Nugas. But Sanatana Goswami, he wrote many, many books about the process of bhakti. And most prominently, he wrote this book called the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is kind of like the rule book for the process of bhakti. He also wrote a book called Brihat Bhagavatamrita, and many other quite amazing books. So why is it that he's putting such emphasis Lord Chaitanya is putting such emphasis to Sanatana Goswami on the process of deity worship? When we understand, it says Kalo Tadhari Kirtana, that in the age of Kali, the process is chanting. Why is he giving this emphasis, saying it's one of the 5 most important processes? Any thoughts?
To give an idea of the personal form of Krishna.
To give an idea of the personal form of Krishna, that's very good. Any other ideas?
To cleanse our...
To cleanse? To cleanse the heart, that's also a very, very good idea. Anything else?
To engage our senses.
engage the senses. But can't we do all these things through chanting Hare Krishna? Can we? Can we all do that? Are we all achieving that? See, that's the thing. It's like with the chanting of Hare Krishna, it's not easy. Great personalities like Thakur Haridas, he could sit down and he could chant 24 hours a day without disturbance. The Goswamis also, they would chant. And they would chant, they'd be so absorbed in hearing and describing the pastimes of the Lord that sometimes they would forget to eat. Actually, most of the time they'd forget to eat. They'd forget to sleep. Does anyone have that problem? Where you're just so absorbed in Krishna's pastimes that you forget to eat and sleep. I think I forget to think of Krishna's pastimes more than I forget to sleep and eat. And actually, it's kind of interesting because I was reading something really interesting last night, the 20th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, just to give you an understanding of the nature of Krishna's pastimes, especially when we can achieve that point of relishing. Because we don't just like talk about Krishna's pastimes. When we actually become purified, we relish Krishna's pastimes. So much so that that's what our life is about. It's our sustenance is to hear and glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now we all know in this material world, it's like, sense gratification. We've all experienced that, right? Some element of sense gratification. You know what it's like? The first time you try something, it's really nice. The next time, not so good. The next time, even worse. And you spend the rest of your life trying to get back to that first experience. That's the material world. Everything is just decreasing in its enjoyment, decreasing in its satisfaction, decreasing in its vitality. That's the nature of the material world. In the spiritual world, it's the opposite. Every time you do something, it's like you're doing it for the first time. The satisfaction you get from doing anything in the spiritual world, it's like doing it for the first time. So you'll hear Krishna's name. Wow, that was amazing. And then again you hear Krishna's name, it's like, wow, it's like you never heard it before. So the spiritual world is just so different. Now the problem is, we're not in the spiritual world right now. Here we are in this material world, and we're actually very, very conditioned by the modes of material nature. Very, very deeply conditioned by the modes of material nature. And these conditionings, these attachments, they go so deep in the heart that they're very, very difficult to remove. It's described in the scriptures that by chanting the Lord's holy name, just once saying the Lord's holy name, one is able to uproot more sinful activities than you're able to commit in one lifetime. Yet here we are, chanting 16 rounds of japa, minimum, every day. Some of us have been doing it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years some devotees have been chanting Hare Krishna. Have they become completely freed from sinful reactions? So it gives you some idea of how long we've been here in this material world performing sinful acts. If one name is enough to destroy more sinful activities than you commit in one lifetime, each mantra has how many names? 16 names. How many mantras do we chant every day? 108 times 16. How many lifetimes are we destroying every day? Yeah? And if you chant 64 rounds in a day, that's 100,000 mantras. Right? So that's 1,600,000 names. There's 1,600,000 lifetimes of karma you've destroyed. That's only 64 rounds. Thakur Haridas would chant 3 lakhs of rounds every day. So 3 times 64. He chant every day. So the point is like that we've been here. Prabhupada, like sometimes we hear the description how the living entity is eternally conditioned, but it's not eternal. It had a beginning. The Prabhupada says we've been here so long you can't trace out the beginning. Because originally, and Prabhupada made the point, originally we all came from the spiritual world. And we were originally, he says in that Hare Krishna record album, he says the living entities were originally all with Krishna. Very clear statement he makes. So we can understand that we've been here in this material world for a long, long, long time. and we become so deeply conditioned in this material world that we're convinced we're this material body. We're convinced. There's not like there's any doubt about it. We're completely convinced that I am this body. But through the process of bhakti, we can overcome this conditioning and actually start to understand, I'm not this body, I'm Krishna's eternal servant. But, and if we could take shelter of the holy name, full shelter of the holy name, then the holy name itself would be sufficient. But unfortunately, because of our conditioning, because of our attachment to the material body, because of our attachments to sense gratification and the material mind and senses, we are unable to focus on the chanting of Hare Krishna. Now, this is not my opinion. Jiva Goswami makes this statement very clearly in the Bhakti Sandarbha. And Srila Prabhupada quotes it in a number of places, but very, very clearly he quotes it in the Madhya Lila, chapter 15, text 108 in the purport. And then he quotes the verses, about 7 verses from the Bhakti Sandarbha. And then he goes on to explain that, he says, yes, it is the opinion of Srimad Bhagavatam that the initiation is not actually necessary, and that chanting of Hare Krishna is sufficient to deliver the living entity back to Godhead. But then he goes on to explain. And keep in mind, when was this written, the Bhakti Sandarbha? Anyone know when Bhakti Sandarbha was written? Around about 470 years ago. Okay, so just try and keep this in context of 470 years ago to 2017. Okay? He says, but insofar as we have experienced, he's talking about himself, insofar as we have experienced that those persons who approach us for initiation, their minds are so disturbed by the modes of material nature, and they're contaminated, by the material conditioning. So 470 odd years ago, 2017, is there a difference, or is it the same thing? Do you think the conditioning is a little bit more now? Do you think the contamination is a little bit more now? That the whole atmosphere is surcharged in this day and age with contamination. All these radio waves bouncing around, exciting the atmosphere, agitating the atmosphere. Like if you go out in the middle of Australia where there's no cell phone towers, you'll find it's much more. I was just where were we? I was somewhere out in the country just recently. I mean, I live out in the country, in New Governor, but it's still, you can hear the trucks and cars and motorbikes all day long going down Tailville Road. But I was somewhere recently, I can't remember where it was, and it was just so quiet. Couldn't hear anything. Oh, that's right, I was up in Scotland. Scotland's like, the other end of the universe, honestly. It's just so, and the air was so clean and fresh, and I actually felt like I was breathing. You could take a full lung of air, and there's no for all the pollution. It's like when I drive back down the Gold Coast, you'll see all this like purple haze over the beach, for all the pollution. The atmosphere in this age is so polluted from the automobile, from smog, the photochemical smog, from all the radio waves, from the cell phones, from the unpleasant things that people say. Srila Prabhupada explains that when someone utters a material sound, it goes up into the atmosphere and it goes around the world 7 times. This is the power of sound. Sound is extraordinarily powerful. And so Prabhupada says, so how much more powerful, this is material sound, how much more powerful is spiritual sound? And that's why we see in the Vedanta Sutra, it says, Om Anavriti Shabdat. By sound, one becomes liberated. So the point I'm making here is that in this age, the atmosphere is so polluted, incredibly polluted. Everywhere you turn, there's some kind of contaminating influence in this day and age. Everywhere you turn. If you turn on a television set, what are they trying to do? They're trying to sell you intoxication. They're trying to sell you sex. They're trying to sell you gambling, meat eating. They're just like pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And the living entities in this age are so deeply conditioned that they don't realize they're conditioned. They think this is normal life. They think they're having a happy time. But we see, anyone who has a little bit of intelligence understands that they're deeply suffering. They're really, really deeply suffering. And they're suffering so much. And this is part of the deluding potency of Krishna. That the deluding potency is so powerful that the living entities don't even realize they're deluded. They're in prison. They think they're in paradise. That's how powerful the deluding potency is. They think they're having a good time. So, Jiva Goswami makes the point that those persons who are approaching him, for initiation, are so materially contaminated that they can't simply sit down and chant Hare Krishna. They can't simply engage themselves in the process of the age, the Yuga Dharma, because of material contamination, because the minds are restless, disturbed, And we see the sages in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, they make the same point. They say, Prayanopasana Sabya, Kalavasmi Manda, Manda Sumanda Matayo, Manda Bhakti Hi Upadhajaha. That people in this age are quarrelsome, lazy, unlucky, misguided, and short-lived, and above all, always disturbed. Just like I was just with my son Mahamantra, we were working at the yoga studio, fixing up a wall in the studio. And I came downstairs to go to the bathroom, and I heard some guy, pull up in the car just at an intersection and pull up lights, and he starts abusing this guy, like yelling swear words at him. So they're always disturbed in this age. The slightest thing, it's like when you're driving. There's so many things going on. Cars going here, cars going there. You look over your shoulder, you change the lane. Oh no, I cut someone off. You're not trying to cut someone off, but you accidentally cut someone off. What happens? They toot their horn, they swear at you. Why did you look where you're going and all this? I mean, I'm sure you've all experienced it on the roads. And people are just so disturbed. And the slightest provocation, they'll kill their dearly beloved. We see this happens all the time. So this is the condition of this age. So therefore, Jiva Goswami, he explains, he says, therefore, at the time of initiation, the devotee is obliged to engage in deity worship. Why? Why is he making this point? Because deity worship is a very, very effective process at purifying the heart of the conditioned living entity. How is that? It works in different ways. Because the topic I was asked, the topic I suggested I speak on is deity worship and its role in devotional service. It's not we just come here and look at Gauritai and bring some flowers or make some garlands or something. There's more to it. There's actually a lot more to it than that. As was rightfully pointed out before, deity worship helps us to develop a personal concept of Krishna. Because the conditioned living entity is actually quite enmeshed in impersonal concepts. We tend to, remember Radhanath Maharaj making at this point some time ago, we tend to love objects and use people. It actually should be the other way around. We should love people and use objects. But we find in this age, it's, everyone, there's so many people, they love their car or they love their, my new iPhone, have you seen my new iPhone? I remember one time going to the temple in one country and, smartphones had just come out. And all the devotees, instead of being in the kirtan, glorifying the deities, they're outside with their new phones and showing each other their new phones. They're just like absorbed in these objects. And they are, after all, just an object. And they break, they don't last very long. But actually, and we can't have a relationship with an object. How do we have a relationship with our phone or our car or our house? Our television set, can we have a relationship with them? No, we just utilize them in Krishna's service. But a human being thrives on relationships. So we're meant to develop relationships, we're meant to cultivate relationships with other living entities. But we find in this age, we're not very good at that. A lot of people tend to be very shut down in terms of cultivating relationships with others. So deity worship enables us to understand that Krishna is a person by engaging in service to him. We dress the deity, we bathe the deity, we feed the deity, we offer arti to the deity. The arti is like a reception. When the Lord has come, so we're offering him all these auspicious items to receive him. And in so many different ways we serve the deity. Now, a practical example we could think of in our own lives is many of you have children. Now, for the woman, when they carry the child in the womb, then naturally affection develops because of that relationship. The child is right there. Now, for a man, it's not necessarily quite the same. But once the child is born and the man starts to serve the child, then the affection grows. And also for the mother, as she serves the child, the affection grows more and more. So just by the service relationship, And when we get married, we serve each other in the relationship. So by the service relationship, affection grows. It's just a natural thing. In all our relationships, through service, through mutual exchange of service, then affection grows. So in the same way, by serving the deity, affection for Krishna grows. Now this affection is the beginning. It's a long way down the track, but it's the beginning of developing prema. If you go through the Nectar devotion from about chapter 20 onwards, it describes how the different rasas are developed. And the very beginning of the rasa is what is called vibhav. So vibhav is like a stimulus, which ultimately helps us develop rati, which then helps us develop the rasa, and when all the rasas are functioning properly, then we develop prema. So by cultivating this relationship with the deity, by serving the deity, we start to understand his personality. Now, that's one way deity worship helps the devotional service, and then I think, as you mentioned, it helps with our purification. So how does it help with purification? As I was saying before, many different ways. It helps with external and internal purification, and external and internal purification are very closely linked. Because by the external, you can tell the internal, and the internal dictates the external. One time, Srila Prabhupada Jamuna told me this story. Prabhupada was at the last Kumbh Mela he went to, which I think was in 1976. And he pointed to Jamuna, he said, "You see this sadhu over here, look at his water pot." His water pot was, shining clean, really gleaming in the sun. And Srila Prabhupada said, "You can tell by that water pot that his heart is very pure." So by the external, if you see someone who's very clean externally, especially in devotional service, it's a good indication that internally that they're also pure. So when we practice deity worship, there's many rules and regulations that need to be followed. Now, it's not just about following rules and regulations. And one time, Prabhupada was telling devotees some of the rules of deity worship, and they said, "Oh, Prabhupada, there's so many rules." Because keep in mind that Prabhupada was dealing with the hippies, and the hippies were, not at all into rules. They were into if it feels good, do it. And they didn't trust people over 25 and all that sort of stuff. And they definitely weren't into rules. But so Srila Prabhupada started to explain some of the more prominent rules, and just a few. And they complained, "Oh, Swamiji, there's so many rules." And Prabhupada said, "If I told you all the rules, you would faint." And the Hari Bhakti Vilas is just full of rules. The Vishnu Smriti is full of rules. The Manu Samhita is full of rules. Tens of thousands of rules about how to practice bhakti. Now, there's a very important point about the rules, is that they have a specific purpose, because the rules help to regulate the mind and the senses. Because currently, our mind and senses, generally speaking, are not very regulated. They're actually quite out of control. But then by regulating the mind, by regulating the senses, we can start to discriminate the difference between the self, between the mind, the intelligence, the senses. We can understand, what is the mind and intelligence pushing? What is the senses pushing me? What is the self? What instructions come to the self? Because of the purification. Because what it's like? It's like when things are not very clean, you can't actually discriminate. Like if you have a mirror that's dirty, and you look at the mirror, or another example might be, we're getting a bit of fog in the morning. So if you try to look at, say the city when there's fog, I don't know if you get fog up here in Brisbane, but down in Wollongong we get fog. And if you try and look off in the distance and see the city, it's all kind of a bit of a haze, and you can't make anything out. But when you get the wind and it blows away all the fog, then you can clearly discriminate between everything. So that's what it's like for the jiva, is we have this fog of conditioning. So we can't discriminate what is the mind, what is the intelligence, what's the senses. So deity worship helps us to purify that, helps us to actually understand, helps us to see clearly what is me, who am I. What is the pushing of the mind, what is the pushing of the senses. So in this way we see that deity worship is very effective at purifying, because we're following this practice of, it's called Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Vaidhi means rules, Sadhana means regulated. So we're following this regulated practice of rules, which helps us to become very purified. So, I mean, there's a lot more I could say about it. I think the art is scheduled to start, is it? So anyhow, so I'll finish it there. And thank you very much for your patiently listening. Shri Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanand.